So I did not expect this many folks on our meeting, and I want to allow time for anyone who has questions or follow-up. But a couple of resources I wanted to share right off the bat. I'm just going to paste in our chat. And the first one is a reference or a resource for teachers exclusively from Google in their help center. And the second link is a support document offered by Google. And that is going to be a cheat sheet. And it's actually something that if you want to copy into your browser or bookmark, or if you have questions about those docs, they're from Google, but they are excellent resources and were very helpful to me in converting a lot of my static assessments into Google Forms. So before we get down to it, a couple of things that we can utilize forms for include things like surveys. If you want to kind of poll your students and see where they're at and kind of collectively analyze the results across different classes or grade levels, whatever your teaching content is. But they also provide for in-class activities or the application grades, a great alternative to Edpuzzle, as we may have some students in our classes who prefer to view an entire video stream as opposed to watching the video and then having questions added as we see with Edpuzzle during the viewing of the video. So it's a great alternative for that. And it can also provide automatic grading for quizzes, common formative assessments. In our department, we use a pretest and a mirrored post-test. Great way to get automatic scoring for that, cut down on your teacher workload, and also with a manual scoring option. So I just wanted to start by sharing my screen and showing you a few of the forms that I've been utilizing and how they have kind of helped me. There we go. So during distance learning last year, these forms were a godsend for me in terms of providing students with access to an activity that I could score very, very easily without having to go through a bunch of documents. So this is one of the forms that I use in the upper level finance class. And basically, the first thing, the most important thing about making a form, this is the title field as well as the description, but we always want to make sure we add a new field for student name, last and first. Otherwise, if your form setting is collecting data, including the student's login, if we don't add a field for the student's name first and foremost, we will literally be scrolling through a list of student usernames, not exactly efficient. So always add a student name field. This is an embedded video. And basically, I'm asking students to view the video and analyze which of the 4 responses to risk the insurance company is presenting in this video. And what I've also been able to do with Google Forms, and this is a great alternative for our English language learners, embedding images is very, very easy in a Google form, and we'll go over real quick how to access and create a basic form. But it's a really nice way to visually represent the content that we are asking students to analyze and apply their learning to. So in this case, with regards to risk, I'm asking students, when we shovel our sidewalk after a snowstorm, what is the risk response that we're utilizing? And basically, we're trying to reduce the risk that somebody will slip and fall by clearing that sidewalk. So that is one way of using Google Forms as an application. In this, I'm a big WWE fan, so I try to embed my passion in the content, whether kids like it or not. And what I did for my finance class last spring was a ratio analysis using Google Forms. And this allowed me to direct them through a financial statement for World Wrestling Entertainment. And I was even able to embed this awesome picture of WrestleMania for them to really just get a visual of the content. Again, always starting with the last and first name. And this allowed me to section the form into various categories of the financial statements that students would be looking at. So we're first looking at liquidity, and scrolling through this, we're going into leverage, debt ratios, and finally our profitability, as well as our valuation or our stock pricing and price to earnings ratio. And I like analyzing the Google Forms through a Google Sheet, which is automatically going to be created, and it's going to embed my students' responses. So I have in my forms analysis here, under the responses tab, the number of students who responded, and then we have our high scores, low scores, everything in between. I can analyze student scores right here. And if I have short answer questions, I can actually go through and manually grade those responses right here in my response insight. And I can break down my student scores by individual or by question. And what this is great to do is allow me to see where my students are at, especially coming in with a pretest at the beginning of a given unit. But also in terms of this application activity, I can see that I have one student who definitely has confused the income statement and the balance sheet, and that's a very foundational level of learning. So I would want to do some reteaching for that one student, and I can actually analyze that student's individual responses and push out direct instruction to that individual based on the form response. The other cool thing is I can open a Google Sheet, and I already have one, but we're going to create a new one just for our purposes today. And this is going to give me the individual student data in a spreadsheet format, which is awesome when I'm going to convert these numerical grades into PowerSchool for the student's actual final assignment grade. And then moving on, some of the other fun activities we've done, I did a review of the equity valuation for an entrepreneurship class. And I made this Google form as an alternate for students who were not fans of Edpuzzle last spring. And what this allows them to do is view the entire Shark Tank pitch, as opposed to viewing through Edpuzzle, where it's going to stop and ask them an embedded question. The alternative Google form allows students to view the entire video and then answer the questions separately if that's what they prefer to do. And they can queue up the video, rewind it, go back and forth, which is a nice way to allow our students to have control over their interaction with an assessment. This is the first CFA that I do in entrepreneurship, and I integrate this as both a pre-test and a mirrored post-test. And you can see I have embedded the name. Again, I can't stress that enough, how frustrating it is if we forget to put the name field in. And then the class period students can select. And then basically a series of assessment questions that ordinarily we would have given to students perhaps on paper or even in Kia, another assessment platform that the Career and Tech Ed department used. What I like about Google Forms is the simplicity of creating an assessment and the ability to make questions mandatory, to reorder questions in an assessment, which gives students less opportunity to share their responses with each other. And I also have the option in Forms to basically eliminate any other tabs from being open on a district issued Chromebook while students are taking my assessment. And last but not least, with our engagement grading criteria, the way I've been assessing students is by using a Google form and student self-analysis. And what this allows my students to do is come in and rate themselves based on our department's agreed values for student engagement. And so students now, using this form, can actually rate themselves based on my engagement criteria. So the first one, arrives to class on time and ready to learn. And then I have a breakdown of what that includes. I ask students to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 over a given 2-week period. And to be very frank, they're honest. They're very, very honest. But the other thing that I can do is integrate a conversation or initiate a conversation with a student or a small group to figure out, hey, what can we collectively work on, or what can we individually work on to boost that engagement grade? I see you've rated yourself a 5 on participation for the past 3 engagement ratings. What can we do to help you to become more participative in class? So I can actually use their responses to integrate a follow-up and help them to ultimately improve with regards to engagement. So we can actually use forms to hit all 3 of our grading categories: engagement, application, and we can use it for performance tasks for summative assessments. So I want to come back to our meet real quick and just ask, before we continue on, and I was going to show you how we can actually set up a form. I wanted to ask if anybody has used the polling feature in Google Meets to perhaps assess students or determine if there's active engagement in the classroom. All right, Warnock, I see you. No, Bob, okay. So real quick, just to get into this, if we're struggling to maybe evaluate student engagement, and perhaps we don't want to necessarily use a Google form, one of the quick things that we can do to create a nice way to see what our students are thinking, doing, or responding, we can actually create a poll. And in order to do that, if we look up at the top of our screen, and I'm going to go back into present mode, on our shared Google Meet view here, we can actually come in to the little activities button, which looks like a triangle on top of a square and a circle. And this is where we'll find all sorts of awesome new features. We can use the Q&A to allow people in the meetings to pose questions to each other. We can integrate breakout rooms, but we can also assign polls. And the reason I bring this up with regards to forms is that polls, like forms, will allow us to receive our data and analyze it in a Google Sheet. And we can actually create a poll right here. And let's see, why is this not letting me? I am not sure if this is not allowing me to create a poll live in person because we are all teachers on this meet, but let's see. Wow, Flans. I have to stop and admonish you for your untribes-like behavior. No, we do not need to record the meet session, April, in terms of getting the results. It doesn't actually have to be recorded. What's cool about it is, just like when we use the attendance button right here, we actually can get a sheet emailed to us. It's going to come right to our South Windsor Apps email, which is awesome. So in the event we were looking to do a poll, we would hit the activities icon. We would go into the poll, and I'm guessing it's our settings as teachers. We don't have any student accounts on the apps. But what happens when we create the poll, we can type in various responses. So a single question, we create a few different responses. And I'll just show you a quick one that I did with my entrepreneurship students. And this is the actual report that I would get. So we were talking about copyright violation and what happens when people infringe on the intellectual property of others. And these results were interesting because these were my students who were distance learning that responded. And basically my polling question was, did Robin Thicke violate Marvin Gaye's copyright in the song Blurred Lines? And we had listened to a clip of that song, and we had compared the two songs side by side. And I can see here that it looks like 7 of my students said, yes, there was a copyright violation. The bottom line is, I might have had 3, 4, 5 other students on that Google Meet who did not respond to that poll. What does that tell me? Well, we certainly weren't engaged when that poll went out. And again, this data is going to be emailed to you in a clickable link that will actually open up in a Drive folder with a subfolder called Meeting Reports. And these are all of the pollings that I've done for my students in various classes on various days. But it allows me to not only integrate an evaluation right on the spot of who is with me on our Google Meet and who may have fallen asleep, gotten up to walk away, creating TikToks on Xbox, whatever else. And so I can initiate conversations with them by saying, hey, look, you were not on the Google Meet engaged on October 16th at 11:29 or whatever time that may have taken place. Now, the other cool thing I can do with this data, I could convert this into an engagement score for that day, or I could use polling questions for an entire week, and I could create an engagement grade for students based on that data. I'm going to come back and stop presenting for a second to ask if anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts so far.
I have one. So do you have to have the poll questions prepared before, or can you just type them as you're going?
You type them right as you're going. So let's say hypothetically, maybe you have the kids working on a quick little activity and you want to push out a poll question. You can actually create the question live in that meet, save it, and then launch it during that same meet when you're ready.
Okay.
The one problem, it does not allow you to save your polling questions from one meet and push them out in another meet. So you are literally recreating the questions each time.
So would you recommend, say, putting it in a Google Doc, then copy and pasting it into the poll, and then you have it saved for each class?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great idea. Or what I do, I email it to myself because I'm a dinosaur and that's how I've always gotten my information for later referral. Yes, Chrissy, definitely. I can share the engagement form. Absolutely. And Robin Thicke, he's a musical artist. He had a great song, Blurred Lines. Perhaps if you've been at a wedding in the past like 5 years or so, you've seen all the single ladies hit the floor when that song comes on. So any other questions so far before we move on? I see, do we record the meet? We already covered that. I think so far we're doing okay unless anybody wants to unmute and ask another question.
Are you still recording this?
I am recording this.
Uh-oh, my agent's going to be upset.
I apologize, Sava, but you know, I had to take that in the beginning.
I'm just kidding.
I expect you not putting your avatar on like my kids do when I'm like, okay, we're going to record. And then everybody goes avatar or the ceiling fan or the, you know, empty wall behind them. So, all right, I'm going to roll on and I'm going to present my screen again. And I just wanted to give you a couple of tips about setting up a new form. And I can't stress enough how much easier forms have made my life and my grading time. And hopefully it will do the same for you. So in terms of creating a form, we are going to start in our drive. And I usually like to start from the given class that I'm going to be creating the form for. So in this case, I will just go to Bobcat Seminar, and I can select, if you've organized your drive and your curriculum folders by content units, I can start with whatever content unit I'm in. So we'll go to digital citizenship. And from here, I'm going to go to Google Forms. And one of the great things, there are some templates out there that we can utilize. And if you wanted to look at templates, you just go to From a Template. This is where we saw some folks very generously shared their course expectation forms for parents and students to sign off on. And actually, that may be a great place to share the engagement rubric, or excuse me, the engagement form, so that everybody can have access to it. I'm going to start from a blank form for our purposes today. And you can see it's very generic. They're all going to look like this when you get started. The first thing we could do is title our form. So I'm just going to call this sample. And from here, what I think we want to do is come down to question 1. And this is where, folks, I can't stress enough, we always want to start with the name. And we're going to make that a required question. And short answer is going to be the default for this. But this is where I could change, and basically, depending on the type of question I want to ask, I can select whether I want to use a scale or things of that nature. If we're doing a quiz, we're going to come up to the settings option here. And in the settings, we have the general setting for collecting email addresses. And this is something we would want to check if, say, we were pushing out a survey to our community, as our school counseling department may be doing. So definitely want to collect the email addresses for that. Requires a sign-in. Yes, we definitely want our students to be signed in on their South Windsor Public Schools account. So in that case, I don't need the email address. In the event it's a final assessment, a summative, you may wish to limit to 1 response. So each sign-in is going to have 1 shot at taking this form. And in the event that they wish to go back and do it again, it's going to send a message, you have already completed this form. I do not allow editing after submission. And unless it's a survey that I want students to see responses on, I'm going to not check that summary charts and text response box. In terms of presentation, this is where we have a great option to shuffle the question order. And then we can also embed an option where students can have a link to submit another response if we have a multiple response question. If it's a longer assessment, a longer summative, we may want to show the students a progress bar, or perhaps for a longer survey, where you are in terms of how long the entire survey is going to last. Last thing, quizzes. If we change this to create a quiz, we are going to have options to lock students out. We are also going to have the option to manually review student data, and students can see missed questions. If it's a pretest, I'm going to remove the correct answers, but they can see the point values for each. And I know that we are cutting it dangerously close to our end time here. So I am available to help anyone who needs assistance in continuing with creating a form, or if you want to create specific types of assessments using forms, or perhaps you want to survey your students about what's going well with distance learning in your class, we can certainly create something along those lines. I am going back to rejoin the Inc. crew, and Ed is a tremendous resource for all of us, but we are all here to support all of our colleagues. So any questions or guidance or assistance you need in forms, please feel free to email me. And Chrissy, I will definitely see if we can get that form shared out on the templates page, but I can also send a copy to everyone who's on this meet, because I did run a wonderful attendance report, which I will get emailed to me from Google Meet. Any questions before we go? Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have an awesome rest of your PD day.